"I'll give you what no woman can give you tonight," she said to the lone virgin rancher. "I'll give you what no woman can give you tonight." The words hung in the lamplight between them, between Vera Thornburg, the 6'2" mail-order bride who'd stepped off that stagecoach like thunder made flesh, and Ethan McCord, the 34-year-old virgin rancher whose hands trembled as he stared at this giant of a woman now standing in his bedroom. She wasn't offering what he expected. Not her body, not duty. Something else entirely. Something that made his throat close and his chest ache with a longing he couldn't name. "What? What do you mean?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible over the Wyoming wind, rattling the windows of his isolated ranch house. Vera's grey eyes held steady on his face, reading every fear, every shame his domineering mother had carved into him before she died. This woman, this magnificent, terrifying woman, had traveled 1,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met. But now she stood before him, offering something no other woman had ever thought to give the lone rancher who flinched from intimacy like a wild horse from a branding iron. "You'll understand," she said softly, taking one step closer to the virgin rancher who'd been told his whole life he wasn't man enough for any woman. "By morning, Ethan McCord, you'll understand exactly what I mean. But what could a giant mail-order bride possibly give a virgin rancher that no other woman could? What did she see in his letters that made her choose him over every other desperate homesteader? And why did her promise sound less like seduction and more like salvation?" 6 hours earlier, Ethan had stood outside Bitter Creek's general store, watching the stagecoach roll in through dust clouds that turned the September sunset blood orange. His hat was crushed in his hands. His shirt collar felt like a noose. Every eye in town was on him because everyone knew what today meant. The mail-order bride was coming. Ethan McCord's last desperate attempt to save his failing ranch and prove he was something more than the broken boy his mother had raised. When the coach door swung open and Vera emerged, the town went silent. She stood taller than any man on that street. Her shoulders were broad enough to carry timber. Her hands looked like they'd wrestled horses and won. She wore a simple traveling dress that couldn't hide the raw power of her frame, and her face, strong-jawed, clear-eyed, framed by wheat gold hair pulled back tight, wasn't pretty in the way men usually wanted. But it was handsome, striking, unforgettable. Ethan's throat closed. The letters hadn't mentioned this, hadn't prepared him for the sheer presence of her. Behind him, he heard Dalton Cruz laugh, that snake of a neighbor who'd been circling Ethan's water rights like a vulture. "Well, McCord," Dalton called out loud enough for everyone to hear, "looks like you finally found a woman big enough to handle your ranch. Question is, are you man enough to handle her?" The town erupted in laughter. Ethan's face burned hot as a branding iron, but Vera didn't flinch. She turned her gaze on Dalton Cruz with the calm of a gunfighter assessing a threat, and something in her eyes made that laughing man go quiet. Then she looked at Ethan, and her expression softened. "Mr. McCord." Her voice was surprisingly warm, like honey stirred into black coffee. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Ethan." He sounded like a scared boy. At 34 years old, he sounded like a child. She stepped closer, boots heavy on the boardwalk, and Ethan had to tilt his head back to meet her eyes. She noticed. He saw recognition flicker across her face, not mockery, but understanding. Like she'd seen that shame before. Like she knew exactly what it felt like to be looked at and found wrong. "Thank you for coming all this way." "Miss Thornburg," Ethan managed. "Mrs. McCord." "As of an hour ago." She pulled a folded paper from her traveling bag. The circuit judge was on the coach. "I thought it best we handle the legalities immediately, unless you object." Ethan stared at the marriage certificate. They were already married. This giant of a woman was already his wife, and he hadn't even shaken her hand yet. "No objection," he whispered. The 7-mile wagon ride to his ranch was torture. Vera sat beside him, silent, watching the Wyoming landscape roll past. Endless prairie grass, distant mountains, a sky so big it made a man feel small. Ethan kept stealing glances at her. She didn't fidget, didn't chatter nervously like he'd imagined a bride might. She just watched everything with that calm, assessing gaze, like she was measuring the land for its secrets. "Your letters mentioned 40 acres, she said finally. "And trouble with a neighbor. Dalton Cruz, he wants my water access. Been sabotaging my fences, spooking my cattle. I can't prove it, but I know." Ethan's hands tightened on the reins. I needed help. A partner. Someone who could make you look less weak to men like him, Vera finished quietly. Ethan flinched. "I didn't mean..." "It's all right. I understand strategic marriages." Her voice held no judgment. "My father tried to sell me to a factory owner in Chicago, man named Orrin Blackwood. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a broodmare to give him strong sons for his factories." Ethan looked at her sharply. She stared straight ahead, jaw tight. "He came to inspect me," Vera continued, her voice steady, but her hands clenched in her lap. "Examined my teeth like I was livestock. Squeezed my arms, my hips, my legs. Told my father I'd do nicely for breeding purposes. Said I was built for hard labor and harder births." Rage bloomed hot in Ethan's chest. That's why I left. Took my mother's wedding ring and $40 I'd saved washing other people's laundry. I chose this life, Ethan McCord. I chose you. Because your letters were kind. You asked about my thoughts, not my childbearing capabilities. You wrote about loneliness and stars, and the sound wind makes through prairie grass. She finally looked at him. You wrote like a man who still had a soul. The ranch house appeared on the horizon, small, weathered, desperately alone against the endless sky. Ethan had cleaned for 3 days straight. It still looked like exactly what it was. The home of a man barely surviving. Vera climbed down before he could help her, then hoisted her own trunk from the wagon bed like it weighed nothing. Ethan rushed to assist anyway. "I can manage," she said, but not unkindly. Inside, she surveyed the 2 cramped rooms with that same measuring gaze. Ethan watched her take in the bare walls, the simple furniture, the crack in the kitchen window he hadn't fixed. His shame grew with every second of her silence. "You'll want supper," she said finally. "Where do you keep provisions?" "I can cook." "You must be exhausted from traveling." "I've been sitting for 3 days. I need to move." She was already pulling an apron from her trunk, tying it with practiced efficiency. "Besides, I suspect you've been living on salt pork and coffee. Let me see what's salvageable." They moved around each other awkwardly in the tiny kitchen. Every time Ethan reached for something, he was suddenly aware of how close she was, how much space she occupied. Not in a bad way, just present, undeniably there. "I'm sorry," he said for the 4th time. "The kitchen's small, and I should have..." "Ethan." She stopped peeling potatoes and looked at him. Really looked at him. "Stop apologizing for existing." The gentleness in her voice broke something in his chest. Supper was quiet. Vera asked practical questions. How many cattle? Where was the water source? What were the winter preparations? Ethan answered, grateful for facts, for anything that kept them from talking about the bedroom, waiting in the darkness beyond the kitchen lamp. But eventually, she stood, stretched her tall frame. "It's late." Ethan's hands started shaking. This was it. The moment he'd dreaded for weeks. The moment when she'd discover just how broken and useless he really was. In the bedroom, Vera had already changed into her nightdress, simple white cotton that somehow made her look even more powerful, more real. She'd let her hair down, and it fell past her shoulders in waves of wheat gold that caught the lamplight. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, waiting. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. Every nightmare his mother had planted in his mind came flooding back. Too soft, too gentle, too weak. No woman wants a man who's afraid of his own shadow. "Ethan." Vera patted the bed beside her. "Sit with me." He obeyed on trembling legs, sitting as far from her as the narrow bed allowed. His hands twisted together in his lap. He couldn't look at her, couldn't breathe properly. The room felt like it was shrinking. "I need to tell you something," Vera said. Her voice was calm, steady, like she was gentling a spooked horse. "About why I really left Chicago." Ethan risked a glance at her face. She was staring at her hands, and for the first time, he saw vulnerability in this giant of a woman. My father lost everything in the panic of '73. Our house, his business, everything. We moved into a tenement near the stockyards, where the air smelled like death and desperation. I was 24, too old to marry well, too big to be wanted. Then Orrin Blackwood came around. She paused, her jaw working. He was a factory owner. Rich, cruel. He'd buried 2 wives already. One in childbirth, one from an accident. Nobody quite believed. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to reach for her hand but didn't know if he was allowed. My father brought him to our rooms, told me to stand up, turn around, lift my skirt so Blackwood could see my ankles and calves. I did it because we were starving. Because my mother was sick, because I thought maybe I could survive any man if it meant she could see a doctor. Vera's voice stayed steady, but her hands clenched white-knuckled in her lap. Blackwood walked around me like I was a horse at auction. He put his hands on me, squeezed my arms to test the muscle, pressed his fingers into my hips and said, "Wide enough. She'll survive multiple births." He looked at my father and said, "She's ugly, but she's built for work and breeding. I'll take her." "God," Ethan whispered. Rage and horror twisted in his gut. I smiled at him, Vera continued, and now there was steel in her voice. I thanked him for his generous offer. Then that night, I took everything I could carry and left. My mother understood. She pressed her wedding ring into my hand and told me to run as far as I could. So I did. I ran all the way to Wyoming, to you. She finally looked at him, and her grey eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I chose you," Ethan McCord, "because your letters were different. You wrote about feeling like you didn't fit in your own skin, about being afraid you'd never be enough for anyone, about watching the stars and wondering if there was someone out there who'd understand what it felt like to be wrong in all the ways the world cared about." Ethan's throat closed, his own eyes burned. "You were honest about your inexperience," Vera said softly. "You apologized 3 times in one letter for being inadequate in matrimonial matters. Most men lie. They puff themselves up and pretend. You just told the truth. You said you were scared. You said you'd never been with a woman and didn't know if you ever could be." "I shouldn't have told you that," Ethan choked out. "You must think I'm pathetic." "I think you're honest." Vera shifted, closer, moving slowly like she was approaching something wild and precious. "I think you're gentle in a world that mistakes gentleness for weakness. I think your mother did something terrible to you, and you've been carrying her poison ever since." Ethan's breath hitched. How did she know? How could she see so clearly? Into the darkest parts of him. "My mother," he started, then stopped. The words felt like broken glass in his throat. "She told me I was wrong, that I was too soft, too sensitive. She said real men didn't flinch from touch, didn't cry, didn't feel things so deeply. She drove away every girl who ever looked at me kindly, told them I was broken, defective. She said no woman would ever want someone like me in her bed, and she was doing them a favor by warning them." "She was wrong," Vera said fiercely. "Ethan, look at me." He couldn't. Shame burned too hot. "Look at me," she repeated, and this time her hand came up to gently turn his face toward hers. Her palm was calloused and warm against his cheek. "Your mother was wrong. You're not broken. You're not defective. You're just a man who feels things deeply, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing." A tear escaped down his cheek. Vera caught it with her thumb. "I don't know what I'm doing," Ethan whispered. "Tonight, I don't know how to be a husband, how to touch you, how to not disappoint you." "Then let me tell you what I'm giving you tonight." Vera's voice dropped to something achingly tender. "I'm giving you what no other woman has given you. Not permission, not pity, not duty." She leaned closer, her forehead almost touching his. "I'm giving you patience, Ethan. Understanding. A partner who doesn't need you to be anything except exactly who you are." I'm giving you time, safety, the freedom to learn without judgment. What if I can't? His voice broke. What if I'm too scared? What if I freeze or fail, or what if you don't? She cupped his face with both hands now, those strong, scarred hands that had survived so much. What if we learn together? What if we go slow? What if tonight isn't about performing or proving anything? What if it's just about two people who've been hurt and rejected, choosing to be gentle with each other? Ethan stared into her eyes and saw no mockery there. No impatience, no disappointment, just steady, unwavering acceptance. I've been told my whole life I'm too much, Vera continued. Too tall, too strong, too intimidating. Men look at me and see a freak or a workhorse, never a woman. But you look at me like I'm... She paused, searching for words. Like I'm magnificent and terrifying and maybe, just maybe, exactly right. You are, Ethan breathed. All of those things. Vera smiled, the first real smile he'd seen, and it transformed her entire face. Then we're even, because you look at me like I'm a person, and I look at you like you're exactly enough man for this woman. She leaned in slowly, giving him every chance to pull away. When her lips brushed his, it was feather soft, questioning. Ethan's heart thundered. Every instinct screamed at him to freeze, to panic, to prove his mother right. But Vera's hands were steady on his face, her lips were patient, and something in him broke free. He kissed her back, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. She made a soft sound of encouragement, and that sound traveled through him like lightning. Her hands moved to his shoulders, steadying him, anchoring him. That's it, she murmured against his mouth. Just like that. You're doing perfect. I don't know what comes next, he admitted, breathless. Neither do I, not really. Vera pulled back just enough to look at him. I told you I left before Blackwood could touch me. That's true. But what I didn't say is that no man's ever touched me with kindness. They've grabbed and groped and treated me like property. But kindness? She shook her head. Never that. So we're both learning, both figuring this out. The revelation settled something in Ethan's chest. They were both scared, both inexperienced in the ways that mattered, both carrying wounds. Can we just, Ethan gestured helplessly, can we just take this slow? As slow as you need. Vera stood and turned down the lamp until the room glowed soft and golden. Then she lay down on the bed on top of the covers and held out her hand. Come here. Let's start with just lying together, feeling safe beside each other. Everything else can wait. Ethan lay down beside her, his heart still racing but no longer from panic. When she wrapped one strong arm around him and pulled his head to her shoulder, he let out a shaky breath. Thank you, he whispered into the darkness. For what? For seeing me, for not giving up before you even arrived, for being patient with someone like me. Vera's arm tightened around him. Thank you for being brave enough to write those letters, for telling the truth when most men lie, for giving me a place where I'm not too much, where maybe, just maybe, I can be exactly enough. They lay there in the lamp glow, two wounded people holding each other carefully, learning the shape and warmth of someone who understood. Outside, the Wyoming wind howled across the prairie. Inside, for the first time in years, Ethan McCord felt safe. But morning would bring new challenges, because Dalton Cruz hadn't given up on stealing Ethan's water rights, and a man who saw weakness would always try to exploit it. Morning came cold and blue through the cracked window. Ethan woke to find Vera already dressed, standing at that window with her arms crossed, staring out at something that made her jaw tight. What is it? He sat up, heart already picking up speed. Riders. 3 of them. Coming fast. She didn't turn from the glass. The one in front, is that your neighbor? Ethan was out of bed in seconds, pulling on his pants with shaking hands. He looked over Vera's shoulder, and his stomach dropped like a stone. Dalton Cruz sat tall on a black gelding, flanked by his 2 ranch hands. Brutal men everyone knew did Dalton's dirty work. Stay inside, Ethan said, reaching for his rifle above the door. No! Vera's hand caught his wrist. Her grip was iron. If you meet him with a gun, he'll use it as an excuse. Let me come with you. He's dangerous. So am I. She released his wrist and walked straight toward the door. Get dressed properly. We meet him together. By the time Ethan got his boots and shirt on, Vera was already on the porch. She stood at the top of the 3 wooden steps, hands on her hips, watching the riders approach with that same calm assessment she'd given the town yesterday. She looked like a general defending a fortress. Dalton pulled up 10 feet from the porch, his men spreading out on either side. He was a hard man in his 40s, face weathered by sun and meanness, eyes like chips of flint. He looked at Vera and his mouth curved into something ugly. Well. The mail-order giant. He spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Heard you arrived yesterday. Whole town's talking about McCord's desperate solution to his failing ranch. Ethan stepped up beside Vera, his face burning. But before he could speak, Vera's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. State your business, Mr. Cruz. We have work to do. Dalton's eyebrows shot up. He wasn't used to women who didn't flinch. My business is with McCord. Don't need his pet beast speaking for him. Try again. Vera descended 1 step. Just 1. But somehow it made her look even taller, even more imposing. With manners this time, the 2 ranch hands shifted in their saddles. One of them, a scarred man named Pike, grinned like he'd just seen something entertaining. Dalton's face darkened. I came to make McCord an offer, he said, eyes locked on Vera like she was a problem he needed to solve. I'm willing to pay fair price for his water access. More than fair, considering his herd's half dead and his fences are falling apart. Not interested, Ethan said, finding his voice. I've told you before, Dalton. That water stays with my land. Your land. Dalton leaned forward in his saddle. How long you think you can hold on to it, boy? Winter's coming. You got maybe 40 head of cattle that look like they're already starving. You got no help except this freak of nature you imported. How long before you lose everything anyway? Ethan's hands clenched. The words hurt because they were partly true. He was failing. Everyone could see it, but Vera laughed. Actually laughed. A sound like summer thunder. You rode 7 miles at dawn to insult a woman you just met. That's what passes for business strategy out here. Dalton's face went red. I'm trying to help the boy before he drowns. But if he wants to be stubborn, that's his funeral. Just remember, McCord, accidents happen on failing ranches. Fences break, cattle wander. Sometimes they end up on my land, and well, possession is 9/10 of the law. Is that a threat? Vera's voice dropped to something dangerous. That's a fact of life, sweetheart. Dalton smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. Big woman like you should understand. The strong take what they want. The weak lose everything. That's how the world works? Then let me teach you another fact. Vera walked down all 3 steps until she stood in the dirt, eye level with Dalton on his horse. Ethan's breath caught. She was close enough for Dalton to kick her, to strike her. But she didn't flinch. Touch 1 cow on this property, cut 1 fence, set 1 foot where you're not invited, and I'll make you regret the day you learned to ride. Pike laughed nervously. The other ranch hand looked at Dalton, waiting for orders. But Dalton just stared at Vera like he'd never seen anything quite like her. You threatening me? He asked softly. I'm promising you. Vera's voice was steady as bedrock. This ranch belongs to my husband. That makes it mine too. And I protect what's mine. You want to test whether I'm serious? Go ahead. But understand something first. I spent 5 years hauling ice blocks in a Chicago warehouse. I've lifted more weight, worked more hours, and survived more cruelty than soft men like you can imagine. You think you scare me? You're just another bully who mistakes size for strength. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the morning sun starting to warm the cold air. He wanted to step forward, to protect Vera, but something stopped him. She didn't need protecting. She was handling this better than he ever could. Dalton finally broke eye contact. He shifted in his saddle, trying to look casual, but Ethan saw the uncertainty there. Big talk from a desperate woman. We'll see how brave you are when winter hits and your husband's too weak to keep this place running. We'll manage. Vera didn't move. Now get off our property before I decide you're trespassing. Dalton turned his horse, but not before shooting Ethan a look full of poison. You let your woman fight your battles now. You really are pathetic, McCord. Your mother was right about you. The words hit like a fist. Ethan's vision blurred red. Before he knew what he was doing, he was moving toward Dalton's horse, hands reaching for the man's leg, ready to pull him down and make him take back those words. Vera's arm caught him around the chest. She was strong enough to stop him cold, to hold him back while he strained against her grip. Not worth it, she murmured in his ear. He wants you to lose control. Don't give him what he wants, Dalton laughed, a cruel, satisfied sound. There it is. The real Ethan McCord. Weak little boy hiding behind his woman's skirts. He spurred his horse, his men following, and they rode off in a cloud of dust and mockery. Ethan sagged against Vera's arm, shame and rage burning through him like poison. She held him until the riders disappeared over the ridge, then slowly released him. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm sorry I lost control. I'm sorry you had to stop me. I'm sorry I'm so—" "Stop!" Vera turned him to face her, hands on his shoulders. "Stop apologizing. You were defending your home. That's not weakness. I let you face him. I hid behind you. He's right, I'm pathetic. You stood beside me. That's different." Her eyes searched his face. "Ethan, listen to me. Men like Dalton, they measure strength by who they can hurt, who they can dominate. But real strength, real courage, that's standing beside someone who's stronger in different ways and not feeling threatened by it. That's knowing when to fight and when to wait for the right moment. He knew my mother," Ethan's voice cracked. "He knew what she said about me. The whole town probably knows. Then the whole town knows your mother was cruel." Vera pulled him close, and Ethan let himself be held by this woman who'd known him less than 24 hours, but somehow understood him completely. What she said doesn't define you. What Dalton thinks doesn't define you. The only thing that matters is what you choose to do next. Ethan pulled back enough to look at her. "What do we do? He's going to sabotage us. He's going to make sure we fail. Then we don't fail." Vera's jaw set in that stubborn line he was learning to recognize. "We fix the fences. We get the cattle stronger. We prepare for winter so well that Dalton can't find a single weak point to exploit. And we do it together. I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are." She cupped his face, forcing him to hold her gaze. "You survived a mother who tried to break you. You had the courage to write those letters, to ask for help, to let me come here even knowing you'd be vulnerable. That's strength, Ethan. Different than Dalton's, but real. And combined with my strength?" A fierce smile crossed her face. "We're going to be formidable." The next 6 weeks proved Vera right in ways Ethan never imagined. She worked like 3 men combined. Every morning before dawn, she was already outside mending fences with hands that never tired, her breath fogging in the cold October air. She taught Ethan techniques she'd learned in Chicago, how to reinforce weak posts, how to read cattle behavior, how to stretch resources when you had almost nothing. Together, they moved through the work with a rhythm that felt like dancing. She'd lift the heavy timber, he'd secure the nails. She'd rope the wandering cattle, he'd guide them home. 2 broken people becoming something stronger than either could be alone. But it wasn't just the physical work that changed things. Every night, they'd collapse into bed exhausted, and Vera would pull him close. Sometimes they just held each other, learning the comfort of another body beside them. Other nights they explored further, tentative touches that grew bolder, whispered encouragement that dissolved fear, patience that transformed intimacy from something terrifying into something sacred. Ethan discovered that Vera trembled when he kissed her neck. Vera learned that Ethan needed reassurance whispered against his skin. They fumbled and laughed and tried again, 2 people teaching each other that gentleness was its own kind of strength. The town noticed the change. When they rode in for supplies, Ethan no longer walked with his shoulders hunched. Vera no longer scanned every face for mockery. They moved together like partners who'd fought battles side by side. And even the gossips fell quiet when they passed. But Dalton Cruise wasn't finished. It happened on a frozen November morning when the first real snow was threatening. Ethan was checking the northern fence line when he found it. 20 feet of fence, cut clean through, and tracks leading straight toward Dalton's property. Fresh tracks, less than an hour old. His heart hammered. This was it. This was Dalton making his move. If Ethan's cattle wandered onto Crew's land, Dalton could claim them legally. Could say they'd strayed, that he was just protecting his own interests. It was theft dressed up as law. Ethan ran back to the house, bursting through the door. "Vera!" He cut the fence. Dalton cut the northern line. She looked up from the bread she was kneading, flour dusting her strong hands. Her eyes went hard as flint. "How much?" 20 feet, fresh. The cattle could be through already. "Then we ride now." She wiped her hands and grabbed her coat. "We find every head before they cross onto his land. How many are in that pasture?" 15, maybe 20. "We can do this." She was already moving, her long strides eating up the distance to the barn. "You take the east side, I'll take west. We drive them toward the gap and repair it fast. He wants us to panic and make mistakes. We stay calm." They saddled the horses in record time and rode hard through the morning cold. Ethan's breath came in clouds. His hands shook on the reins, but not from fear this time. From rage, from determination. Dalton had pushed too far. The cattle were scattered, but not yet through the gap. Vera's whistle cut through the air, sharp, commanding, and the animals turned toward it like she was speaking their language. Ethan rode the perimeter, guiding stragglers, watching his wife work with a skill that made his chest swell with pride. Within 30 minutes, they had every head accounted for and moving back toward the southern pasture. Vera rode to the cut fence and dismounted, examining the clean cuts with narrowed eyes. "Wire cutters," she said. "Professional job." He wanted this to look deliberate. "Wanted you scared." "It worked," Ethan admitted, riding up beside her. "Good." She pulled tools from her saddlebag. "Use that fear. Let it make you sharp, not stupid. Help me fix this." They worked together in the cold, their hands moving in practice sync. Vera held the wire taut while Ethan secured the posts. He hammered while she braced. When it was done, the fence looked stronger than before. But as they were finishing, Dalton appeared on the ridge, watching. Just sitting his horse and watching with that same smug expression. He'd seen them fix it. Seen them win this round. And the look on his face said this was far from over. "Let him watch," Vera said softly, following Ethan's gaze. "Let him see that we don't break." They rode back to the house side by side, and Ethan realized something had shifted in him. The fear was still there, probably always would be, but it no longer controlled him. Vera had shown him that strength wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and doing the work anyway. That night, as the first snow finally began to fall, they sat by the fire. Vera mended a shirt while Ethan updated the ranch ledger. The numbers were still tight, but better. They'd lost fewer cattle than expected. The fences were holding. They might actually survive the winter. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. Vera looked up from her sewing. "For what?" "For keeping your promise. For giving me what no woman could give me." He set down the ledger and moved to sit beside her on the floor, his back against the chair where she sat. "You gave me patience, understanding. You gave me time to become someone who could stand beside you instead of hiding behind you." She set down her mending and ran her fingers through his hair, a gesture that had become familiar, comforting. "You gave me something too." "What?" "A place where being strong isn't a curse, where I'm not too much. Where I can be gentle and fierce in the same breath, and nobody tells me I'm doing it wrong." Her voice caught. "You look at me like I'm beautiful, Ethan. No one's ever done that before." He turned to face her, taking her scarred, capable hands in his. "You are beautiful. You're magnificent. You're everything I was too scared to dream of." She pulled him up into a kiss that tasted like home, like safety. Like two people who'd found each other across impossible distance and decided to build something neither could build alone. Outside, the snow fell heavier. Somewhere out there, Dalton Cruz was probably planning his next move. Winter would be brutal. There would be more challenges, more threats, more moments when fear tried to win. But inside this small house, a virgin rancher and a giant mail-order bride held each other close and knew something Dalton would never understand. That real strength wasn't about dominance or control. It was about two wounded people choosing gentleness, choosing patience, choosing each other every single day, no matter what the world said they should be. Ethan McCord wasn't broken. He'd just been waiting for someone who could see past his mother's poison to the man he actually was. And Vera Thornburg wasn't too much. She was exactly enough for a man brave enough to stand beside her. Together, they were formidable. Together, they were finally home. So here's what I want to know. Have you ever felt like you were too much or not enough for the world around you? Have you ever met someone who saw past what everyone else said you were supposed to be and loved exactly who you actually are? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, make sure you hit that notification bell so you never miss another story like this. These tales of unexpected love and quiet courage are what we're all about here. Tell us where you're watching from. Whether you're in Wyoming like Ethan and Vera or halfway across the world, I want to know where this story found you today. Comment your location below and let's build a community of people who believe that being gentle, being different, and being exactly who you are is the strongest thing you can be. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next story.